This is Programming Weekly, Episode 1, recorded January 10th, 2013. Hi, I'm Ryan Murphy, and this is Programming Weekly. This is a show that we've tried to do before, and, well, we just couldn't quite get the hang of it. Couldn't quite figure out, alright, what are we going to talk about? So we're redoing it, starting over, and by we, I mean I, because my partner didn't want anything to do with it after our first failure. So the whole point of this show is going to be to show you how to write Python. And really not so much the importance of, it's not so important that it's Python as much as try to give you an understanding of programming techniques and how to become a better coder or just become a coder if it's something you're interested in. So whether you're a new user, someone who's never programmed before, or you're someone who's programmed before but you're trying to find a new language, maybe something a little easier to use or just something different, I'm hoping that you will learn from these videos. There are other websites who've tried to make videos, but I didn't get to see too much of the technical part of it. It was, someone drawing on a chalkboard or on a whiteboard, and I don't want to feel like I'm in a classroom. I want to actually see code being written. And, from this YouTube video, you can be able to pull up your own IDE, we'll talk about what that is later, and be able to write your code along with, and you go, oh, hey, what is he doing? Well, here, I want to try this and see what happens if I try to write this function and make it work this way. I want to give you that opportunity to learn at your own pace. I chose Python primarily because, one, it's easy to learn. Two, it was the first language I really learned. I had taken classes for Visual Basic before, but I couldn't write a lick of that now because I never actually learned it. It got to a point where it was too complicated, or the instructor just couldn't teach it. And at the time there was no YouTube. YouTube was just an idea. So trying to find videos on how to do this stuff, it just wasn't there. But now in this day and age, we can make these videos available to people and try to bring more people into programming. A lot of people, a lot of IT people aren't programmers. They may be sysadmins and they don't understand the importance of, knowing a programming language. It can make your job easier. You don't have to write the next Microsoft Office or anything, but you could write simple scripts just to automate tasks that would otherwise be extremely tedious. So, let's get started. I already have my development environment set up. What you'll probably want to do, it doesn't matter what operating system you're on. You can be on Windows, Mac OS, Linux, whatever flavor of Linux. It's just going to be the method in which you install. Personally, right now, I'm using Linux Mint. You can be in Ubuntu, like I said, Windows and Mac OS. If you're in Windows or Mac OS, you'll definitely want to head over to python.org and click the download link. We'll primarily be focusing on Python 2.7 because currently Python 2 has been around for such a long time. The packages that are compatible with it, there are a lot more packages that are compatible with it, and 3 hasn't been widely adopted yet. There are some operating Linux OSs that are starting to dip in to using it. It's more and more packages are starting to switch over because it's the future. Python's going to drop version 2 soon. Don't know when, could be years, but they're no longer adding on to it or improving it. They may release some security fixes they find along the way that need to be fixed, but there won't be any code changes. They want to push everyone to 3. But there are some minor differences between 2 and 3. But we'll focus on 2 so you can actually, take advantage of everything that's out there right now. So like I said, here we're at the python.org download page. Windows doesn't come with Python installed at all. It just doesn't. You're going to have to download the installer, whether, if you have 32-bit version of Windows or 64-bit, make sure you download the appropriate version. Mac OS is a slightly different story. Mac OS comes with Python pre-installed, but it doesn't come with the development environment. So it would be a good idea to download the Mac OS package from here too, and you'll also get, not only will you get a more up-to-date version of Python, but you'll get the IDE, which is the Integrated Development Environment, which lets you write the code and run the code all from the same system. Idle isn't the greatest IDE out there. If you want to use Notepad and run Python manually, you can do that. I'll show you how to do it. It's about the same on every system. Windows, once again, a little different. You might have to modify your path to point at the right folder where the Python executable is. Linux, depending on what version of Linux you have, most of the desktop versions, if not all, will have Python installed, because there's probably some applet that needs it. That's how important it is to the Linux community. If you're in most Linux OS, it'll still be running 2. Some, if you're like the bleeding edge and you're the geek who you have to have the latest version of Linux where it has the latest packages like in Gen 2 or Arch Linux, you're going to have Python 3. But it would be a good idea to try to get Python 2 installed. I can't really help you on how to do it in Arch or Gen 2. There's a lot of documentation online. Go find it. If you're in a Debian-based Linux, like I am, which would include Ubuntu, Debian, Linux Mint, you can do a simple, you can open up a terminal window and do a sudo apt-get install Python, which I already have it installed, and you'll want to do a sudo apt-get install idle. Now, the version of Mint that I'm running does have Python 2.73. If your version doesn't have exactly that, it has, say, 2.6 point something, or maybe even 2.5, which later on may not coincide with what we're trying to do. There may be some packages that don't work. You want at least 2.6. But if you're at 2.5, you're fine for now. But you might want to update your OS sometime. Just to exit this guy. So, once you have Python installed, go ahead and find idle. It's going to have a nifty little icon, very similar, if not the exact same as the Python logo here. Find in your start menu or applications folder, launch it, and you'll get a window like this. This is a graphical version of the Python shell. Oops. Let's try to get that open again. I actually did that on purpose so I could clear the screen so you can see my mess from earlier. Anyway, graphical version of the Python shell, you can start typing in commands directly into the shell. It's a window on the left here. start typing commands and see what they do. So let's say 1 plus 1. You get the answer 2. So we want to say, let's set a variable equal to 1. This will be a variable that we'll use later. So we go x equals 1. Well, what does x equal? I want to print x. So you can see you can try out commands. This is a good way to do things if you're not sure how a command is going to work and you want to test it. You can go to the shell and just start typing the stuff in and see what your results are before you start putting it in your code. This screen on the right here, which will not open by default when you first open idle. This is something that I opened. So you would go File, New Window. This is where you'll actually type a script. If you're running Linux or Mac OS, recommended thing to do on the first line of your code, and you don't have to do this, but is to type in the location of the interpreter in which you're running. And you should do this for most shell scripts that you're running. In this case, it's Python. So pull open that terminal window again. And if you're able to type in Python, it means that its location is in the path. So in Mac OS and Linux, you should be able to type in either which Python or where is Python. Okay, that did not do what I thought it would. Just do which Python, and I'll tell you what the first binary it is that you're going to run if you try typing that command. So you'll go over here and you want to type in comment, which is the hashtag exclamation /user/bin/python. Windows users, you don't have to worry about this because Windows handles this whole thing differently. It will handle the execution of these files based on the file extension. So when it sees when the Windows sees that it's a .py file for Python, it'll know, oh hey, yeah, I know, I have the Python interpreter installed. I'll run this script through that. Just like when you have a Word document or an Excel file. But Linux and Mac OS, we can run these scripts without actually having to type in Python later if we give it the proper permissions. But we'll get more into that later. So it's a good idea. You don't have to do it, but it's a good idea. If you're going to do everything within idle and you don't want to touch the terminal, then don't worry about this. You don't have to do it. All right, let's try to work with some variables now. Python is a dynamic data type language, meaning it will assume the type of data that you want to put in a variable. So let's say you put in, over our shell, you put in x equals 1. Well, that data type of 1 with no quotes around it is an integer. And it's going to assume it's an integer. To the point that if you do something like, let's say, 1 divided by, well, this won't be a good example. Let's try something else. Let's do 7 divided by 2. Well, on normal math, we know that's going to be 3.5. But the numbers that we are working with here are both integers. So Python's going to look at that and do integer division, which means we have no remainders and no decimal points. So we get the answer 3. It'll just drop off the remainder. So you're probably now thinking, well, what if I wanted to do 7 divided by 2? What if I wanted the decimal value? Well, there are multiple ways, my friend. You can do 7.0 divided by 2 and get 3.5. Or you could do 7 divided by 2.0 and get 3.5. There are ways that you can also cast these values to other data types or to a specific data type that you want. For example, let's say I have the value 7, but I want to make it a floating point number. So I want to be able to do this floating point division, but I'm just going to work with integers for now. But my code might change later where it is a decimal. You can type in float 7 divided by 2. So now Python knows, yeah, this is definitely going to be a decimal value. We get 3.5 again. Now, what do you suppose will happen if you type in the float of 7 divided by 2? Surprised? Well, you shouldn't be. Because Python's going to go in first and evaluate the equation, and then convert the output of that equation to the float. So 7 divided by 2, well, those are both integers, so we'll do integer division. We get 3. Oh, well, now you want to make it a float too, so you'll get 3.0. There's another. Now, what if you didn't want to do decimal division, but you actually wanted the remainder? Well, you can do your 7 divided by 2 to get your whole value, and then you can do 7, what they call a modulo operator, which it's a percent sign, 2. So 7 modulo 2, and that figures out what the remainder of those values would be if they were divided by each other. So 3 with a remainder of 1. So let's do something really simple. Let's write a program where we can put in 2 values and have it return the result and its remainder. So let's go over here to our script. I should point out that hashtags are considered comments, and also triple quotes. So if you do 3 quotes like this and start typing some words here, this will create a comment. For you new programmers out there, a comment is just code that your interpreter will not run. It is more for the programmer or future developers who will look at your code and figure out what you're trying to do. It is a good idea to have comments. It is extremely possible to not comment enough and possible to comment too much. Now, that latter part, some people would argue with me, but I have seen programmers who have written comments for every single line, and I think that's ridiculous. But choose your own style, or wherever you work at. If they want you to, if you work somewhere and they want a certain style, do what they want. If you go to school and try to learn this, or if you're in school, do what your professor wants. Anyway, went on a tangent. Let's get back to the script. Python has a nifty function for accepting input data. So let's create our first value. We'll call it x. But we want to be able to pull input from the user. So what we can do is say x equals input. And what input will do, it requires an argument. Now an argument is a value of some sort that you pass to a function. Now input is a built-in function. The argument that it wants is a string, which a string value is words or characters. You don't do math on them, or you shouldn't do math on them. Some languages will let you do math with them. In this case, it wants a prompt because it's going to ask the user for a value. So let's just tell it, what is the first value? Okay, good question there. Also, you'll notice I use a very simple variable name here of x. When you're writing code, especially scripts like this, you may want to be more descriptive in your variable names. So you can actually write out a variable. It doesn't have to be one character, but it can't start with a number. You can end with numbers or have numbers in the middle of it, but you can't start with a number. And also in Python, there's about 30 keywords that are built in the language that you shouldn't use. In some cases, it will let you use them if it sees that you're trying to do something else with it, but you shouldn't use them. So now to do division, we'll need a second value. We want the value that we are going to be dividing by. So we'll call it value 2, just show, we'll spell it correctly, just to show what a good variable is. So value 2 equals input. What number will you be dividing by? Alright, so now we're getting our input. Now we need to do the math. Now we could do this in a couple different ways. We could do each math as a solution. Because we're going to run two formulas here now. We have to do the division and the modulo. So let's do that. So let's call this division. I know there's a math term for it, and I believe it's quotient or something like that. I'm not a math professor. I'm not a math student. I write code so it can do the math for me. So division, x divided by value 2. So now we have a variable and we're making it equal towards the solution of the other two variables that the end user will declare. X divided by value 2. Our next line, we want the remainder equals x modulo value 2. Now we want to be able to output this to the screen. Python has a command called print, and this lets you print string values to the screen. So we'll type in print division. Alright, now what we need to do, better backtrack. Print, remember I said print will only let you output a string. Division is going to be an integer. It's going to be a number. You can't print that to a screen. So what you have to do is cast it to a string. So remember how we had float over here? Well, we're going to use a function called str, and we will wrap it around division. So we have the string value of division. Now we'll need to concatenate this with an actual string, so we can denote that the next value will be the remainder. So we'll have a plus sign and a quotation mark. and you can do single or double quotes. See, remember up here, these values here, this is technically a string here, and this is a string that we pass in the input argument. So we're going to create a string down here. We'll use single quotes just to be the same. I'm going to put an R for remainder, and end that. And now we want to concatenate, so we'll have another plus sign. You need to have plus signs between the variables and the string when you're concatenating. Or if you have multiple strings that you're pulling together, or multiple variables, you need to have that plus sign in there. Some people will use commas. That works too, but later when we start working with files, you'll find that to be really annoying because it won't quite work the way you expect. So I recommend just use plus signs from the beginning and don't mess with the commas. Alright, now we want to get remainder in there. That's going to be an integer value as well, so let's convert that to a string. A remainder. Alright, our program is done. Now in idle, most time you should be able just to hit F5, and on your screen this window will pop up and it'll ask you must save. Source code must be saved. Okay, so we'll hit alright. The save as box will come up. Let's find a good place to put this. I have a lot of folders. Linux machines, a lot of hidden folders, and of course idle's going to show all of them. We'll put it with videos here. Okay, so we'll call it F1 division .py. It's very important that you end it with .py, because that'll tell idle that this is not just a text file, this is not a batch script or something else. This is a Python script. So hit save. Alright, oh look, something happened over here in the shell. From this point here, this is our script starting. Now it's asking me for a value. So we've been going with 7 a lot, so let's do 7. Type in 7, and you'll press enter. What number we been dividing by? We've been doing 2, so let's do 2. And hit enter. Our answer, 3 remainder 1. So, you know, hopefully you've gotten out of this that Python can't do just division, that you can do addition, multiplication, subtraction. One thing you'll have to be careful with division though is floating point. Computers aren't perfect. Floating point is hard for a computer. It does a lot of binary. You may not always get the right answer if you're doing floating point division. So keep that in mind. Be careful. A lot of programs, if you're working with money, it's a good idea to do fixed point so you don't have, you know, the chance of having .33333, you know. But this concludes my first instruction to you on beginning to use Python. And I hope you get something out of it. You want to complain, praise me, or like I said, complain about maybe the quality. I did something wrong, said something wrong. Put it down in the YouTube comments. I'll read them. Trust me. Thanks for watching, and hopefully we'll see you next week.